What's good, YouTube? Or Storm here, coming at you guys with another deck profile today. Today I'll be showing you guys Moonlights, or Moonlights as they're known as their TCG name. So Moonlights are basically an archetype used by Sarah in the anime. So if you guys, as you guys know, I usually keep up with pretty much every episode of Arc 5. So Sarah is one of a user from the Fusion Dimension who uses this archetype. Now, I was hoping eventually we would get her archetype, but obviously, she didn't get a ton of screen time in the beginning part of the anime. But she did get some more screen time recently, which is good. But now she does now that she had a big duel in the anime, she got enough cards to actually make an archetype, and they're releasing this is coming out, I believe, in Shining Victories. So most of these cards are in Shining Victories minus Crimson Fox, but we will get to that. But first I want to talk about a few cards I've seen in some builds. Let me find Bear. I've seen some builds running Fire Fist Bear, and Bear's not a terrible card in the deck. It's kind of like a lot of I've seen Bujin and Constellar builds that did run this card just as a one-of. It's alright. It's not entirely necessary, but you can. I just didn't. I felt like running any card that's not a Lunalight, it gets really cloggy. I wasn't the biggest fan of Instant Fusion into Norden in this deck, at least. It was decent in testing, but I also found that it just wasn't really necessary, and I just needed to make sure to turbo out the deck to get to my combo pieces. And similarly, if you're running any kind of traps, such as the Solemn Brigade, they are not good in this deck. Because if you run too many traps, you need your opponent to have monsters to actually kill them with the way this deck runs. You need them to have monsters out in order to kill them easier. So that's the problem with the Solemn Brigade and any kind of traps in this deck, is that first off, it slows you. Drawing traps off of cards like Chicken Game and Upstart Goblin only slows you down. They just slow you down. You need to get those big boss monsters out and just kill them, and that's why I don't play the Solemn Brigade in this deck. So that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to deck profile. 3 copies of Moonlight or Lunalight Blue Cat. Blue Cat's effect is when she is special summoned, she can target any other Moonlight monster you control, and it gets double attack until the end of the turn. But you can only use it once per turn. And then if this card is on the field, destroyed by battle, or card effect, you can special summon one Lunalight or Moonlight monster from your deck. Basically, this card is kind of like your floating engine. It's sort of like it's a lot like Cosmos, in that you're basically, the way you do is you use your floating to kind of float to your next turn rather than relying on back row to keep you safe, and that's where this card kind of comes in. 2 copies of Moonlight Purple Butterfly. This card's effect is basically, the only thing I really wish about this card is it worked like Kalute. So when I first read it, I'm like, oh, it's like Kalute, and then I realized it wasn't. So it says, you can send this card from your hand to your side of the field graveyard, then target one Lunalight monster or Moonlight monster you control. That card gains 1,000 attack until the end of the turn. Then you can banish from the graveyard, special summon one Moonlight monster from your hand, but you can only use that effect once per turn. So at first when I read this card, I'm like, oh, it's a Kalute, that's pretty good, except then I realized it was only during my turn. It's not the best of cards, but the grave effect is really nice. And it's one of the original ones, but like I said, it's not the best of cards, but I kind of like it too, simply because it allows me to get blue cats out of my hand, which is, blue cat enables just a lot of just silly OTKs. Then next is 3 copies of Moonlight Black Sheep. So Black Sheep's effect is you can discard this card to activate one of the following kits. You add one Lunalight or Moonlight monster from your graveyard except itself, and then you can add one Polymerization from your deck to your hand. Now that is not once per turn. If this card is sent to the graveyard as a fusion material, you can add to your hand one Moonlight monster from your graveyard except itself, or one face-up Moonlight Pendulum monster from your extra deck. So this is a Poly Searcher that replaces itself when it's used as fusion material. That's really good. The only problem I really have is that I wish the Poly, it said add one Polymerization from your graveyard or deck to your hand, but I guess that would have been too broken. But the card is really good. It gives you a Poly Searcher that you can search, so it's pretty important. You got to play 3. 2 copies of Moonlight White Rabbit. So White Rabbit is actually really important to the strategy. When it's normal summoned, it grabs a Moonlight monster from your graveyard except itself and special summons a defense position. But this is the key part. Once per turn, you can target a number of spell or traps your opponent controls up to the other Moonlight monsters you control, return them to the hand. This effect is sort of like, it works a lot like Rakiri, the Blackwing Synchro monster. Basically, if you have a bunch of other Moonlight monsters out, you can just bounce your opponent's back row to make sure you can push for game. It's really important. Much like Blizzard and Blackwings, I kind of felt like this card was best at 2. 3 can get kind of cloggy because you don't want to have multiple copies in your hand. So yeah, I kind of felt like it's like a lot like Blizzard and Blackwings. You only don't want to really run more than 2. Then this card is actually one of the nuttier cards in the archetype. This is, I think it's a jump promo in the OCG. Unfortunately, I may not see it for a while because of that. But this card is a Moonlight Crimson Box. So this is, I think that this is, other than Wolf, this is the biggest monster in the entire main deck. So, and you can normal summon it. So its first effect is if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes 0 until the end of the turn. And during either player's turn, when a card effect is activated that targets a Moonlight monster you control, you can banish this card from your graveyard, negate the activation. If you do, both players gain 1,000 life points. So the key thing about this card is both effects are not once per turn, and you have a lot of cards that can recycle this card and reuse it. And on top of that, it keeps your Moonlight or Moonlight fusions that are in the that are on the field from being targeted. Because one of the first things your opponent's going to do to get rid of your Panther and Cat Dancers, because those gals can be targeted, is that your opponent's going to stell them. They're going to 101 them. So having that built-in protection is really good. Obviously, it won't protect you from Ignister, but that's kind of unfortunate. You know, Ignister's kind of stops just a lot of great big boss monsters. But it's a really insanely good card, and there's a lot of OTKs that card just opens up for the deck, and it's a great support card. Then 2 copies of Moonlight Wolf. Wolf, and these are the 2 Pendulum monsters. Wolf is the scale 1 Pendulum monster. Pendulum effect is you cannot Pendulum summon except for Moonlight monsters. A lot of the Pendulum monsters read like that. You can fusion summon 1 Moonlight monster from your extra deck by banishing the monsters you control or have in your graveyard as fusion material. So basically, it's a miracle fusion, which is really good. And then its monster effect, it says if a Moonlight monster you control attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing damage. This is really good because a lot of times, now the thing about Moonlight or Lunalights is that when your opponent has them, they're going to try to float their way out of it. Like if you're playing against something, it's Yang Zings. But the thing is, this deck just fights through floaters like nothing. And even if they keep trying, having Wolf plus Panther Dancer oftentimes will enable game, especially if your opponent is trying to go all defensive. The reason I only run 2 is because it's a really good number, because it can't be Pendulum summoned first off, and second off, like it's not the easiest. It's not the easiest card to get out, and it also requires tributes. You don't want to have multiple copies of Wolf in your hand. Then 3 copies of Moonlight Tiger. So Moonlight Tiger's Pendulum effect is once per turn, you can target 1 Moonlight monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but its effects are gated. Also, it cannot attack, and it's destroyed during the end phase. So why this is good is Panther and Cat Dancer can be brought back from the graveyard once they've actually been successfully summoned. They can be brought straight back from the graveyard. Now, they don't have some restrictions like some other fusions like Construct had, but the main thing is it allows you to recur a lot of your resources, and then it basically set up all your big poly plays. And then the first monster effect is this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect. You can target 1 Moonlight monster in your graveyard, special summon it. You can only activate this effect once per turn. So this is a lot like Plush Fire, in that like if they destroy it in the Pendulum Zone, it does activate, but it is once per turn, unlike Plush Fire, so that's at least good. Now for the spells, 1 Raigeki. Raigeki is really good, being able, even if it only clears your opponent's field for a turn, using Raigeki to clear their field and then kill them is really good. 3 Fusion Recovery. I didn't want to run 3 because I thought it might get cloggy, but you really need ways to recur your polys from your graveyard. It's really important, because if you roll through polys like nothing in this deck. Then of course 3 polys, it's a fusion deck, kind of self-explanatory. You got to run 3 Upstart Goblins. Again, this deck does not have trouble dealing 12k or more in damage, so like you got to thin out the deck. 2 MSTs, because this deck can lose to back row, and you really can't afford to play Twin Twisters in this deck, because you don't want to be thinning out your hand too much. And then 3 Tankies. Everything in this deck is Beast Warriors, so 3 Tankies gives you your consistency. 3 Chicken Games. I'm still a little iffy about this card. Maybe when the new Perfume spell card comes out, I might replace this chicken games with this. But chicken game, it may seem counterintuitive, but the fact is you really do need to thin out your deck, and it's really important that you get to all your combo pieces. So you've got to turbo out the deck so you see everything. For the traps, only play 4. 2 copies of Moonlight Reincarnation Dance. People underestimate how good this card is. Yes, it's a trap, and yes, it has to set, and yes, it has certain restrictions. But being able to plus off of go plus for no reason is always good. And it says if a monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can add up to 2 Moonlight monsters from your deck to your hand. Plusing for no reason is always good. Then 2 Call of the Haunted, because this allows us to recur our resources and be able to reuse our fusion monsters. Now for the extra deck. So first, the first fusion, we run 3 of Moonlight Cat Dancer. So Cat Dancer is your main fusion monster you're going to be going into quite often. So Cat Dancer's effect is that she cannot be destroyed by battles, and then once per turn during your main phase, you contribute 1 other Moonlight monster you control, and she requires 2, by the way, Moonlight monsters, by the way. You can tribute that monster. This monster, you can once during this turn, each your monster opponent controls cannot be destroyed by battle. This card can attack all monsters twice each during each battle phase this turn. If it declares an attack, it inflicts a thunder damage. So this card and Panther Dancer work like that's how they work. So basically, you can attack all. It allows you to run through floaters. It's like imagine if Susanoo, the Bujin XE that can attack all monsters once each. But instead of that, it can attack once, they're not destroyed, and attack again and inflict more damage. It's really, really good. And it's an interesting mechanic in general because I don't think we've had cards like Susanoo that can attack all monsters. We haven't had something like Cat Dancer that can attack all of them and not destroy them the first time. Then 3 copies of Panther Dancer. Panther Dancer is the reason a lot of people don't like this deck is because they think the fusions require fusion monsters, so they are harder to summon. That's not necessarily the case. And Panther Dancer requires Cat Dancer and another Moonlight monster. And much like Construct, it reads, must first be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials. It cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, so if this hits the field, your opponent tries to bottomless, or this is out and they try to Regeki, it will not die. And then, unlike Cat Dancer, it has a similar effect to Cat Dancer, except instead of it can be activated during your main phase 1, and it doesn't require tribute, so that's really good. And when it just runs over a monster by battle, it gains 200 attack till the end of the battle phase. You don't normally have to get to Leo Dancer because this card will often end games on its own, but I feel like having it is there. Then 2 copies of Leo Dancer. You might think, well, why are you playing Leo Dancer? It usually wins games on its own, does it not? And that's true, but you can make the second one if you play the deck right. A lot of reason people don't like this deck. So if you don't know what Leo Dancer requires, it requires Panther Dancer and 2 other Lunalight or Moonlight monsters. So the first effect is it says it must be fusion summoned with above fusion materials, cannot be special summoned by other ways. Now it cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects, so they're going to have to get something like Ignister out. And it's a 3500 monster, and then it can attack and make a second attack each battle phase. If it attacks a monster, at the end of the damage step, destroy all special summon monsters your opponent controls. It basically allows you to completely clear off your opponent's field, and that's really, really good. And I have made the second one. Yes, I have made 2 in the same game. It's not really that hard if you know what you're doing. Now for the XYZs, I have Utopia and Topi the Lightning here. Even though you do have some beefy monsters, cards like Magnus, cards like big beefy monsters with immunities, cards like Great Magnus, cards like Ultimate Falcon. Unless you have Cat Dancer's effect, you may have a little bit of trouble getting over them, so that's why these cards are here. One Karen Gorgon, I think this card kind of works well in tandem with some of your fusions, keeping them protected. 1 copy of Tiger King, I find this card is actually MVP a lot of times because people forget that it doesn't just have the effect on summon, it can also negate all non-Destroyer monsters on the field, so that's really, really good. Even if your opponent has a field full of just annoying monsters, you can just summon this, flip, and activate its effect, and they're all negated, so it's really good. Copy of 101, sometimes I don't want to put opponent's monster right back in the extra deck, so I run 101. 1 copy of Castell for getting rid of annoying problem monsters. Then 1 copy of Diamond Direwolf. I really actually like this card in this deck because you can actually pop your own monsters and pop an opponent's card, and then it will trigger Blue Cat's effect, so it's really good being able to pop Blue Cat, and then trigger her effects pretty good. So anyway, guys, as always, I thank you guys for watching the video game. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of my Moonlight deck profile. As always, guys, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. So, Storm, signing out.